Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got winter storm warnings out continuing here tonight for the northern Koyukuk Valley on up across the eastern Brooks Range, with winter weather advisories continuing tonight over the western part of the Brooks Range into the North Slope and areas there, as well as the northern upper Yukon Valley. All this will be gradually improving overnight tonight, and they'll be ending, but look for additional snow, gusty winds, and creating low visibilities and hazardous traveling conditions through this area. Out here to the west, Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait coast on down to St. Lawrence Island, winter storm warning kicks in for tonight and into tomorrow, as that strong frontal boundary pushes more strong winds, south winds, and blowing snow conditions back into these areas later tonight. After a break today across St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula. Moving on to the satellite imagery, intense storm here way out over the far western Bering Sea, and the front pushing eastward here, approaching Adak, brought strong winds today to the Shemya 2 area, was a high wind warning out, and that's due to end here in the next couple of hours. Shemya had peak wind gusts 71 miles per hour, but even stronger winds just back to the northwest there, in closer to the low center, as high as 90 miles an hour. That got very close to the area there, didn't quite make it, and still could see some higher 82, 90 mile per hour wind gusts out there over the next couple of hours, but then those will end as this low center pulls off to the north. Frontal boundary kicking the winds up now to about 50 miles an hour at Adak, and even the Pribilofs, not even in the rain shield there, just some high stuff. They're seeing winds up to about 45 miles an hour at St. George Island. Otherwise, a break here over the eastern Bering down to the Fox Islands on Alaska, Dutch Harbor area. And then this area of moisture here bringing some rain, as much as half an inch at Cold Bay today, with this batch of moisture flowing northward. You're going to have a wave to the south there. Old frontal boundary through the central interior bringing rain and snow mixed. Still pretty mild conditions. That turns to all snow here as you get up toward the Brooks Range and along the Arctic coast. And a weakening low center tracking up to about this position there on the western Arctic coast. They really kicked the winds up at Cape Lisburne. They had gusts 53 miles per hour here a couple hours ago. Snow and blowing snow with that, all along the Brooks Range there into the eastern Brooks Range area. A lot less in the way of precipitation occurring along the Arctic coast. In fact, Barrow on over to about Dead Horse, dry today, but snow over toward Barter Island, and then along this front that mixes in with rain in the milder temperatures, still in the lower 40s at McGrath this afternoon, and above freezing here generally through the southwest interior, but cooler air back to the west, also a lot drier as well here. Kind of a weak break here, a little bit of a break between this front and the stronger one out here to the west. High pressure just made for actually a pretty good day here from Kodiak State Airport. Had some sunshine and hazy sunshine through the high clouds here across Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula, and then nothing but sunshine across the southeast coast. Some channel gusty winds, strong 1,053 millibar high there over the Northwest Territories. Northeast winds gusting 45 miles an hour at Skagway, anywhere from 35 to 40 or so through portions of Lynn Canal and the inside waters there. Otherwise, generally lighter winds, much lighter winds in the remainder of the area, especially out along the coast. And taking a look at tonight's forecast, we'll see that low tracks northward, so winds will diminish here. And the hurricane force wind warning in the marine areas there will end here about the same time the high wind warning does in the next couple of hours over the western Aleutians. This front holds together but weakens as it pulls away from the main low center there. Still look for gale force winds into the Pribilofs, rain or snow Less wind, though, as you head south, so those winds will diminish as that front pushes eastward there for the AKwx area, changing, and the precipitation changing to showers. Fair here in toward Bristol Bay. A few lingering showers in the west, but you can see south winds on the increase again here, again, St. Lawrence Island, and eventually into the Seward, or through the Bering Strait there in the Seward Peninsula. And just high pressure here with some leftover snow shower conditions, real light and scattered. Also some clearing as well, especially over the Copper River Basin. But most of the snow and blowing snow now exiting the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and the Brooks Range there. So conditions improving. The system working over the top and then dropping southeastward. High pressure kind of temporarily builds in behind it. Dry for the North Gulf Coast tonight. Variable clouds. Batch of moisture here in the form of rain and snow over the southwest. That'll kick northeastward, and that'll slide over for some kind of wet mixed slop here over south central Alaska tomorrow in areas, mixed rain or snow. Temperatures highs in the lower to mid 30s, so definitely whatever snow falls will be of the wet variety. And dry over the eastern interior, though. High pressure keeping it nice over there. Light winds, and temperatures not all that bad for this time of the year. And another sunny day in store for the southeast coast with what looks like lighter winds, a lot less of a gradient now, especially in the north there around Skagway. So you see lighter winds tomorrow, but still sunny. And shower activity, Kodiak, in the form of mostly rain, but pretty light. And then this front weak low develops there, moves up toward the Pribilofs. Pretty wet day there tomorrow. Periods of light rain for the eastern Aleutians. Snow and blowing snow, St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, right up into the northwest coast. A lot colder air back here to the west, so snow showers and gusty winds from AKwx eventually. That increases out toward Shimia. And then for Sunday, got this frontal boundary edging eastward, so look for the clouds to increase. Better chance of snow now for the Tanana Valley, White Mountains on up over the eastern interior, but looks pretty light. Mixed rain and snow here along the North Gulf Coast, south central Alaska. This low develops, pulls into the western Gulf, so that'll kick those northwest winds up across Kodiak. Could see gusts 45 miles an hour. Snow showers scattered around the western interior. High pressure tries to build in over the eastern, or actually it does build in over the eastern Aleutians for a break on Sunday with partly sunny skies. More wind and rain come into the far western Aleutians with the next system. Stays sunny across the southeast coast. Low temperatures for tonight, generally above zero. A few areas dropping below, but not all that far. Single numbers central Arctic coast. Quite mild, lower to mid 30s here. In fact, upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. 20s south central Alaska, and 20s to lower 30s for the Panhandle. And then the highs for tomorrow into the 25 to 35 degree range here for the central interior, but much chillier up to the north, upper Yukon Valley. Teens to mid 20s Arctic coast. Really mild, mid 40s here for the Bristol Bay area, with near 40 into the southwest interior. Lower to mid 30s south central Alaska, lower 40s Kodiak, 30s to near 40 for the Aleutians, and mostly in the upper 20s to upper 30s for the Panhandle. And your lows for Sunday morning, again, anywhere from 0 to 10 below over the northeast, teens on the Arctic coast, 20s to lower 30s in the southwest, and chilly in the Panhandle. And for the highs the next day, mid 30s south central Alaska, and mid 20s for the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather Saturday morning, batch IFR here over the southwest, another along the south coast of the Alaska Peninsula, east side of the Aleutian Range, southern Kodiak Island, more IFR, St. Lawrence Island, through the Bering Strait, Seward Peninsula up to the northwest coast, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and a little bit IFR here, exiting the central Aleutians, marginal out to the west, VFR for the Panhandle. And good VFR continues to the southeast coast tomorrow, as well as the eastern interior here, with deteriorating conditions as you head west in toward that front pushing in along the coast here. There are areas of IFR, marginal VFR, IFR along and south of the western Brooks Range. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast looks VFR, and marginal VFR out here over the Bering Sea for the most part. And then for Sunday morning, more IFR pushes inland here to almost to the central interior, back to the west Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, up to about Point Lay. and extending down into the southwest interior, marginal VFR, southwest coast, all the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, some IFR here along the North Gulf Coast, southern Kenai Peninsula, also along and south of the Alaska Range. VFR continues, Tanana Valley, eastern interior, all the way down across the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, looks like some marginal VFR begins to increase here along the north coast to the Panhandle, otherwise staying VFR, and moisture moving into the interior eastward here. So marginal VFR northern Cook Inlet, IFR up toward the northern Sitna Valley in the Alaska Range. Back to marginal, more IFR as you approach the Brooks Range, and narrow band of VFR and a break here in the west, and then more marginal VFR along the coast with some IFR along the Yukon Delta coast, improving here over the eastern Aleutians up toward the Pribilofs, and then more IFR poised to move into the western Aleutians. And for the passes, tomorrow Anatuvik starts out VFR in the afternoon, becoming marginal or trending toward marginal VFR. But I think Adigan will stay VFR the entire day. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out IFR, and then as moisture begins to push off to the east, look for some improvement in the afternoon. And that same trend for Rainy as well, becoming marginal into the afternoon toward evening. Windy though, VFR with moisture pushing northward, trending toward marginal conditions later in the day. And for Isabel, marginal VFR trending toward marginal, and Mentasta will stay VFR. For Tanita, VFR maybe becoming marginal later in the day. And for Portage, VFR becoming IFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR, both Saturday and Sunday. Freezing levels here, 6,000 feet over the eastern Aleutian. Southerly flow keeps it 2,000 feet up north side of Nunivak Island. At the surface here, north of St. Matthew Island. And also we've got 2,000 to 6,000 foot freezing levels along the North Gulf Coast. And then those dive southward here west of the Panhandle. Surface right along the outer coastline of the southeast coast. And for icing, batch of moisture here shifting eastward across south central Alaska at Kodiak Island. Above about 6,000 feet, just isolated moderate of a mixed variety, and then looks like some considerable moderate rime icing here with that front as it pushes in toward the coast from the northwest coast, and then on down toward the eastern Aleutians, improving back to the west. Jet stream, kind of a split flow here coming across the Pacific there with kind of a trough right through here, so southerly flow across Bristol Bay at about 70 knots, stronger flow back to the west, ridging here. This trough right through here is the one that's coming up across the northwest interior today. That'll come up over the ridge. It'll kind of rebound a little bit. Then this will come on up on Sunday. For 9,000 feet, southerly flow 40 knots here, right up into the southwest interior, 55 knots along the coast, northward to 50 knots in toward the Selawik Valley. Turning southwest, dropping back to 30 knots, light here over the ridge over the eastern interior. Good winds 35 to 50 over the Aleutians, northerlies 25 to 35 over the Panhandle. And at 3,000 feet, those drop off considerably at this elevation. Still a little gusty down south, otherwise light over the eastern interior. Southerlies 35 to 40 here in the west, and then westerlies 35 to as high as 50 knots over the western Aleutians. Trough right through here, drops it back to about 25 to 35. Turbulence-wise, considerable moderate chop here over the northwest interior, actually the central Brooks Range. Southward dissipating a little bit, but still pretty light to isolated moderate along the Aleutians below 9,000 feet, and a little choppy here over the southern southeast coast. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's Sea Ice Analysis. Over this last week, it's really taken a push back to the north, or gotten pushed back to the north by the persistent strong southerly winds. Sunday and Monday, it was still down around St. Matthew Island. Now you can see it's almost halfway up to St. Lawrence Island, and that trend's going to continue for the next 4 or 5 days. Moving on to coastal water forecasts, northwest winds 15 knots here along all of the outer coastline of the Panhandle, seas running 7 to 9 feet. North 15, Lynn Canal, 3-foot sea, same thing for Stevens Passage, light winds for Clarence Strait. Those winds pick up again on Sunday. Small craft advisories for northern Lynn Canal for north winds 25 knots and gale force northerly gusts coming into Stevens Passage. Otherwise, Clarence Strait, north 15, seas 3 feet, northeast 15 on the south coast with 6 to 7 foot seas, kind of variable 10 up here on the north coast, seas still running 5 to 6 feet. For Cook Inlet, northeast 10 tomorrow, seas 2 to 3 feet, southwest 10 for Kamishak Bay. Pretty good wind-wise here for the North Gulf Coast from the Barren Islands all the way over toward Middleton. Winds 15 knots, Prince William Sound, light southwesterlies at 10. And for Sunday, those kick up here, especially for Kamishak Bay. West winds 45 knots, 13-foot seas, northwest 45 for the Barren Islands, 10-foot seas, 15 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, coming up about 20 knots here on the west side, east 15 for the Prince William Sound zone. Southern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories northwest, increasing to 25 knots, but staying light north of the Forelands. And for Bristol Bay, southeast 25 tomorrow, and southerlies 20 to 30 knots blowing across the Alaska Peninsula, and 20-knot winds here from Castle Cape right up the east side of Kodiak, out of the south, and south 15 for Shelikof Strait. Outlook for Sunday, good gales here for Kodiak Island, west-northwest 35 to 40 knots. Gale force northwesterlies all the way down from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, west 30 for the Alaska Peninsula. Same thing for Bristol Bay, a good west wind at 30 knots with 11-foot seas. Fox Islands tomorrow, south to southwest, 25 to 30 knots, seas as high as 15 feet. Central Aleutians, west-southwest at 30, and winds still up above gale force here out over the western Aleutians, but a lot lighter than today, southwest 40, 27-foot seas. And then on Sunday, that next system kicks those winds up, swings them around to the southeast, 45 knots, staying under storm force the way it looks at this point in time. And then for the AKwx area south, 30 to 35 knots, and southwest 20 for Unmak Island, become west at 25 to 30 for Unalaska Island with seas 12 to 17 feet. Southwest coast tomorrow, southerlies 30 to 35 knots with the gales north of Nunivak Island, south 40 for St. Lawrence Island, 30 knots from the south, St. Matthew Island with 35-foot seas, I believe that says. Anyway, for the Pribilofs, south 30 knots with 19-foot seas. Actually, I think that's 15 feet. And then for Sunday, southwest 25, St. Matthew Island, 20 knots in Norton Sound. Small craft advisories here all along the southwest coast, 25 to 30 knot winds. Southwest 35, 22-foot seas for St. Matthew Island, and west 30 with 20-foot seas for the Pribilofs. And for the Beaufort Sea on the east side here, kind of a wind switch going on, starting out west 30 knots on the extreme east side, and then southeast 20, increasing to 25 on the central coast, with brisk wind advisories from the central coast all the way down to Cape Beaufort. Then full gales here, Cape Beaufort all the way to the Bering Strait, south to southeast 40. And then for Sunday, lighter winds, 15 to 20 knots here in the west, 20 knots western coast, and then south 15, southeast 15 on the east side. And for tonight again, winter storm warning comes back in the picture, St. Lawrence Island, and eventually into the Seward Peninsula later tonight into tomorrow as this next pretty potent front gradually pushes eastward. It's going to weaken here in the southern portion with a lot lighter winds and less gradient as it pushes eastward as that low center tracks due north right into the Russian Far East. This area of moisture watching kind of comes in across south central Alaska tomorrow for a cloudy, rainy, snowy type of day with sunny skies up over the eastern and northeast interior as well as the southeast coast with less wind tomorrow. And then on Sunday, another sunny day for the Panhandle, a little bit of an increase in the winds, better chance of snow, light snow here over the eastern interior along this frontal boundary, and then those gusty winds for Kodiak with that low center pulling into the western Gulf, and a chance of snow increases on the northwest coast, and the next storm coming into the western Aleutians.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.